Hey everybody, it is Justin, your guide into Legends of the Mara and Otherside. And in this video, I wanted to kind of compare and kind of explain the similarities and differences between, you know, Farway and Yuga and how I see their purposes as it stands currently. Kind of talk about what's the difference between Otherdeeds and the new Paradise and Riftlands, and kind of just go back to basics and explain things from the ground up, and especially in the context of Project Dragon, with Metropolis coming up pretty soon here, as well as the new Legends of the Mara Rebirth and Rise game. So, first of all, I'm going to zoom in here and kind of take a look at the other side section first, right? So, I would say, you guys are probably asking yourselves, so what's the purpose of another deed, right? Where is the utility that Yuga has to build out for another deed, right? And in my opinion, it's best to describe the purpose first, right? We all got into Otherdeeds because we were interested in a native Web3 metaverse. We were interested in games, we were interested in the economy, the items, the resources, and building, and the overarching vision of, something like a Ready Player One metaverse, right? And we saw the potential of things like the Bored Ape Yacht Club Island, Metropolis, Bailey and Riders Island, as well as, all of the, UGC elements, and the core permanent, places where Yuga's communities can come together and interact and basically play games, right? We all came for that vision. And underneath those games, obviously, are the derivatives such as, the resources, sediment, artifacts, and the overarching Agora economy. And even below that represents our Codas, our Bored Apes, Mutant Apes, etc., the Grailed 10KTF, so on and so forth. And those represent our identities and our 3D models and Otherside, as well as, IP. But at the very bottom of all of that, at the very base layer, is an Otherdeed itself. So what it really is an Otherdeed, and the Otherdeed essentially is your access to Otherside itself. It is your ability to be a Voyager on all of our jumps into the games, right? It's the game access. It's access to artifacts, access to resources like sediment or the resources itself, as well as, of course, the ODK builder tooling that we will see at some point in the future. That is essentially the utility and the vertical of everything that it resides inside of Yuga's native Web3 metaverse. I think that's what the majority of people, initially were here for, right? I definitely remember jumping into the first trip, and that was what caught my attention, right? And we should probably also kind of talk about Legends of the Mara in that context, right? Because the majority of us understand that at the beginning, when Yuga owned Legends of the Mara, that seemed to be the place where we would, mine our resources, mine our sediment, and so on and so forth to participate in the economy. And again, we all know that Faraway is now in charge of, Legends of the Mara. So that provides an interesting fork in IP, as well as a place to kind of explain where Faraway is putting their resources, no pun intended, as well as, what markets they're targeting, right? So we'll also differentiate the difference between Otherdeeds and the new Paradise and Riftlands, right? Because their use case is, in the similar vein of IP, they're related, but their utility is specifically different. Okay, so we'll kind of go over that as well. So again, Yuga is for the native Web3 metaverse vision, right? And Faraway is more catered to mass mainstream appeal, as well as their attention flow focusing more towards broad game appeal in, say, Web 2 spaces, acting as the first touch exposure to intellectual property like Kodamaras, I guess Kodas, for example, but primarily like heavy metal, Kodamaras, as well as Kodas. So that does drive some interest towards the other side vision as an optionality. But my main point was I wanted to talk specifically to just what Faraway has been doing on that front, right? We know that Farway is in charge of Duke Dash Unclogged. It's in charge of Serum City with the Mutant Cartel and Novel Labs. It's in charge of game development that is outside of the scope of a native Web3 metaverse with Improbable on Yuga's end. And Faraway is in charge of much of that distribution that will hit a lot of the Web2 mainstream markets. So in that regards, what are Paradise and Riftlands? What are their purposes? And how does that interact with the IP that Faraway has acquired from Yuga, such as the Coda Mara's heavy metal, and then additionally, the sewer passes, the vessels, Mara's, ship parts, catalysts, and partner loot, right? So, in my opinion, Faraway is in charge of creating a vertical that is synergistic, and provides a way to make that optional first step for people who are in Web 2 that may want to jump into a native Web 3 metaverse because they see things like codas being more powerful in their game experiences. Like, what is a coda? What is Otherside in its entirety, right? So let's talk about the difference between like Otherdeeds and Paradise Lands and Riftlands inside of Legends of the Mara. So again, Paradise Lands are essentially the new user entry into the ecosystem. They're basically supposed to, let me actually zoom in real quick so you guys can read it too. They're essentially the way to have a game board, where you can put your codas or your Kodamaras onto the game board so then you can play Legends of the Mara, right? And again, Faraway is expanding the scope of Legends of the Mara, especially since, we're getting the Rebirth and the Rise game, as well as all the other Faraway games in the game suite. But that's pretty important because those are going to hit mobile mainstream sectors and stuff like that. And we'll still have that web, still probably the website as well. But again, these are supposed to appeal to new players that may want to get into the game. And if you have been following the FAQ, we know that Sediment is going back into the hands of Yuga because Sediment will not be offered as a reward inside of the leaderboards, right? In Season 4. They are still available now in Season 3.5. But again, those sediment fragments will convert into Ascension materials for Kodamaras, right? I remember making a video on this last week. I'll try to link that in the description so you can probably take a look at that as well. So again, Faraway is in charge of making sure that the the new entrants aren't necessarily farming sediment fragments that are inside of Otherside, because I know that's been a point of friction for a lot of people, wondering why are there Paradise Lands? Are we getting dilution? Are we getting Riftlands? And the answer is no, because Paradise Lands and Riftlands do not confer those benefits or utilities, essentially, that Otherdeeds intrinsically have, because Otherdeeds are all about ODK. It's all about resources, artifacts, game access, and sediment, right? And that lies purely in the Yuga vertical, whereas Paradise Lands and Riftlands, reside inside of the Legends of the Mara under Faraway's vertical, right? So you have new users essentially funneling into the games. They have an optionality to say, hey, what are codas? What is Otherside? And they can have an optional pathway to a Web3 metaverse, or they can say, hey, I like staying inside of Legends of the Mara. I like spending my money here, and that provides them optionality, as well as a lower barrier of entry into this ecosystem that doesn't touch the core vertical of what an Otherdeed is, right? So it's non-dilutive as well. It's to separate things. So where does that leave Kodamaras and heavy metal, right? So what's the difference between, actually, that's a good question. What's the difference between Kodas and Kodamaras and heavy metal, right? Because Kodas, they basically are really powerful allies, probably the most powerful inside of just the Legends of the Mara game, right? So that allows them to have an advantage. Again, Kodas and Otherdeeds essentially have kind of pulled back and are just more of the interoperable aspect, still provide, some type of value inside of the Faraway ecosystem, because, we're still going to get Ascension materials. We're going to get more recipes. Heavy metal, users will eventually be able to play the game in Season 4 because they have Riftlands, right? you know, and that allows Faraway to unlock, essentially utilize the player base that have been, holding heavies for a long period of time and, want to probably do something, right? And Kodamaras, of course, are Faraway's, essentially mirror to Kodas. And again, Kodamaras will have specific, use case, again, with relation to the FAQ with, ascension, materials, recipes, assigning points and things like that, right? Because we're getting Legends of the Mara points, we're getting point modifiers. And again, we'll have to keep our eyes peeled for those details as they come out as we get closer to, the Rebirth and Rise, releases of the games, right? And again, I did want to point out that heavy metal stats will be based on power score. I believe that will translate over to damage and critical chance, and then additionally, the class of your heavy metal will also translate over to abilities, or there was one more thing, HP. I believe HP. Yeah. So again, you'll have to keep an eye on those with regards to heavy metal inside of Legends of the Mara. So again, just to reiterate, the difference is that Faraway is working on mass mainstream appeal and providing, interoperability, across their ecosystem with heavy metals and Kodamaras. And again, at the very bottom, at the very baseline of this synergy is IP networks. The IP network effect drives interest across game genres. I know I'm kind of blocking the way here, but that's what I wrote. So again, there are similar verticals between Faraway and Yuga, and they work together, but the NFTs inside of them serve very different purposes, especially as it pertains to like a Web3 metaverse versus, mass mainstream games. So again, Codas, Bored Apes, Mutant Apes, 3D models on Otherside, PFP identities, IP and branding, resources and artifacts and economy stay purely within Yuga's control, right? So again, I would say there's a silver lining with regards to that. The economy for Legends of the Mara gets transferred back essentially to, how Yuga will, again, kind of work on how to figure out. We're gonna have to figure out how we're gonna get resources, artifacts, and things like that inside of Otherside, right? But in my opinion, we need to see games first. Project Dragon, we need to see, persistent, games like Metropolis or Bored Ape Island or even Coda Island. We need to see people build out games that actually drive interest to necessitate an actual economy. And we also need to see things like Ape Chain in order to have those things go on top of it. So then we're not getting destroyed by gas. I definitely don't want that. So again, I hope that kind of clears up things for you guys. Definitely let me know if you have any questions or concerns, or even your thoughts in the comments below, because I know this has been a point of contention for a lot of people and a lot of confusion. So hopefully this clears a lot of that up. Again, if you guys need anything, I'll be inside of the Discords. I'll link that in the description. Of course, Otherside Wiki. But again, definitely hit that like and subscribe button. It always helps me create more content. I'll see you guys in the next one. It's going to be epic.